record them and put them on YouTube, and always get feedback about people that have watched it and got some value from it. So yeah, that's good
That's
value.
great.
Yeah. So tell me, where are you up to with this awakening stuff?
I don't know actually.
Yeah, it's a crazy question, isn't it?
I know, and with the POK, it's they talk about locations.
Yeah.
And is that something that you follow?
No, no.
No.
I've heard of it. I've heard about it, and but I know very little about it. But I get the gist of it. I have. I mean, what I've also heard is that there's apparent choices about which location to, would you say, reside in, or to occupy, or however you want to put it. Um, and I find that one a little bit interesting, because the way I see awakening is that we recognize that um, choices happen, but not made by us. Yeah. So I don't know. What's your experience about that?
You know, so it was 2 years ago, almost 2 years ago, that I took the Finder's course, had definitely some profound experiences, um, to going into like bliss, like crazy love and bliss for months.
Yep, yep.
And still having fear though, like I don't understand what happened to me. I
Mm.
was scared and full of bliss at the same time.
Yeah, yeah, I get that. Yeah.
And then I started having some shadow stuff come in, like in the middle of the night. It seemed like 3 a.m. I'd go, oh no. And you know, I started to maybe dive in, like they call it deconditioning.
Hmm.
So I kind of dove in, like, I'm gonna get this. Oh, shame. I'm gonna get rid of all, and I think I went too hard. So I
Yep.
backed off on that.
Sure.
So I've just been slowly kind of like deconditioning, and I'd say I go like major, I was calling it my bliss train, where I just, especially if I'm in nature, and um it's calming down a little bit. I've been one to try too hard, and I could feel when I try too hard, I go away from.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, I get that.
um,
Yeah.
So I'm just kind of cruising along, but I've been noticing, like, even the last couple of weeks, a feeling like, not like I'm disappearing. I'm becoming more vacant, like way less thought. I mean, things that
Yep.
even a couple weeks ago I'd go, wow, I would have had a thought about that, and I don't.
Yes. Good stuff. Yeah.
But I'm sort of feeling like I feel less. I feel less. I think less, like I'm less, and it feels weird.
Mm.
Uh, I still
Yeah.
can find my bliss. If I think about gratitude, I'm
Yes.
so full.
Immediately immersed. Yes, I get that. Yeah.
But kind of being in the world, I feel not removed. I actually feel like blended with things. Like, I did the headless way a bit, which really focuses on, I can feel headless. I feel not separation. Um, I can talk to anybody. I feel completely open. I don't really have much fear at all. I used to have a lot of fear. I don't have fear so much.
Right. 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 So what about
Yes,
reactivity? Do you get triggered?
so rarely, so rarely. And when I do, it's like, whoa, where'd that come from?
Right.
Um,
Okay. Yeah.
I've almost kind of welcomed them, tell you the truth, because I feel like that's kind of where you make some progress.
That's where the juice is, for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, good stuff. Yeah.
Politics, politics were triggering me a little bit, and I realized, I kind of worked through it, which was awesome, that it felt old. Wasn't about the politics. It was kind of the way I was spoken to, kind of like not included, not asked. I'm just kind of being told this is how it is, which I didn't like. Um, and what else did I notice? Oh, I
So
had a
you
really,
would you call
sorry.
that being triggered? So it's not so much an emotion, not a intense emotional explosion, but rather an annoyance.
Yeah, I felt a little heat. I definitely felt like, whoo, what was that all about?
Yeah, 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 yeah,
But it just doesn't happen much. And then my sister, like, we had a little weird on texting. I cried so hard for a day. And then the next day I was kind of like, what was that? Did I dream that? It felt so put away. And
yeah,
it kind of came back. I kind of had to like process through that. But yeah, I feel kind of like, oof.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, so where am I?
Yeah. Well, my inclination is to say, well, you're awake. You know, that's it. You. So whether I don't know where that fits in with Jeffrey Martin's the thing, but from a point of view of Liberation Unleashed, you know, you're through the gate for sure. Yeah. Um, but we often have weird expectations, and I don't think you're fully immersed in those expectations, but some are still there. So just a slightly different way to look at it, and we're looking at the same thing, but just putting different labels on it and looking at it from a different perspective, perhaps. The way I see it, my experience in myself and with others that I've worked with, is that we can be quote quote through the gate. Okay, we can be awake. We have this. We've had significant shifts, if you like, from the way we used to be before any of this started. Not that that's a time or a place anyway, because we've probably been at it all our life, really, without even realizing it. But nevertheless, something shifted, and our identification has weakened. But there are still remnants. And so when what this is part of the expectation thing, people before seekers who haven't had that shift often have really rather weird ideas about what it's going to be like when they wake up, and they think things like, I won't have any thoughts anymore. Right? Well, it's kind of there's an element of truth in these things, or a reality in these things, but it's not quite like that, you know. Um, and the other thing is that I'll live in bliss for the rest of my life. Well, of course, that's not true either, you know. That bliss stuff, I tend to refer to it as a honeymoon period, because it's always comes to an end, usually with doubt. Doubt will turn up and go, well, am I or am I not? You know. So in Jeffrey Martin's perspective, I'm inclined to think that you go, oh, well, I'm not in that place, I'm in this place, kind of thing, and I move back and forward between them. But I just see it as identification turning up. So when we get triggered, we're identifying, right? There are beliefs in action that we're responding to, even if we don't know what they are, and we usually don't know what they are. So the way I see it is that when we wake up, there are remnants of identification hanging around that we don't know about until they get triggered. They're subconscious, if you like. And then when something happens, like that text from your sister, boom, you get triggered into that place and you go, there's something here. Now, often, simply looking at it from a, oh, I don't know how to put it. I run out of words easily with this stuff. A non-usual, a non-societally conditioned place um, is often enough to dissolve it. We simply see what the belief is that we've been carrying that was hidden until it got triggered. And then that belief can just simply dissolve, because it's not a deep thing. It's just been lurking around. I won't say in the shadows, because I'll reserve that for something deeper, but it's been lurking around unknown, and then when it gets triggered, there it is. We see it and it's gone. Right, so I just call that remnants of identification. Now, they're going to happen. Well, at least in my case, I don't know, it's been about 14 years since I woke up, and they still happen. They still turn up, you know, and I suspect that they'll turn up for the rest of my life. Who knows, you know? But once they're seen, they're generally gone. Or if they're deeper, they might come back a couple of times. So we might need you know, we feel like they're gone, but then something else triggers them and back they come, kind of thing. The most recent one for me has come back twice now. Excuse me. I got triggered by. I won't go into the story. It's not really that relevant. But I got triggered by a situation, and the belief I found was that I think that the world should be and people should be the way I think they should be. So I'd been carrying that one around, and then this thing triggered it, and all of a sudden I went, God, how crazy is that? That's just insanity. You know, I saw it and it was, you know, instantly gone, I thought. And then guess what? When Trump got elected, back it came, you know. And so I got a chance to look at it again, and it went a little bit deeper. So it wasn't just that the world should be the way I think it should be, but that my wants had power. There was that I had this image of myself as a kid standing in front of the fridge demanding ice cream, and figured that because I wanted it so intensely, it would happen. You know, so that was there was that idea that the world should be the way I think it should be was actually resting on this idea that my wants had power. So and this was only well, probably a month or two ago, you know. So they keep coming, those kind of things. But then besides the remnants, there's what I call shadow work. So then there's what Penilla, I don't know if you know Penilla, but she calls it a toxic starting point. So that we get conditioned. So just a side thing, I think all kids have experienced trauma. So regardless of their conditions, you know, from the poorest kid to the richest parents or whatever, kids will suffer trauma simply because they don't get what they want, or simply because they, you know, whatever, they get bullied or whatever. And if if there's problems, you know, between parents, they're constantly exposed to that, you know. And the problem is that kids don't know, they haven't got the facility to put that into um, how can I put it, a wise perspective. They've got a very narrow focus on life kind of thing, and they're naive and innocent. And so what happens is that they don't know how to cope with that situation all the time, and the consequence is that they develop ways to distract from it. You know, yeah, that'll do for the moment. But yeah, so what they do is, and they frequently take on the blame for that situation themselves. They say they must be fighting because of me, right? So then they feel guilty, and then guilt is a really, really hard one to cope with. So they cover it with shame. Shame is still shitty, but it's a bit easier to cope with than guilt. Right? And then as we evolve through life, we bury it, and we tend to not to. And so, what happens is, as an adult, if we get triggered by some of those things, if they even start to get a little bit active, we then jump into diversionary measures. You know, whether it's our mind, whether we're thinking, or whether we get active and start doing something, or however we've evolved, we learn to avoid it. And so what we've got, the very closest we can get to it is maybe feeling a bit of fear, right? But where what's really active is what covers up the fear is anger, uh, and annoyance and stuff like that. So once we get through that, we get to the fear. When we get through the fear, we'll often get terror, real serious terror underneath that. And if we can get through that, then we get to the shame. And if we get to understand the shame, we get to the guilt, and then we can dissolve the whole thing, kind of thing. But that's what I call shadow work. And I think we've all got variations of that. Some of us, it's hardly an issue, and for others, it rules our life, you know. So that's that's the deep remaining identification that we need to see through as we work down this path. So that's a bit of an overview of the way I see things. And if and the way to recognize if there's shadow work to be done there is that that stuff keeps coming back, and when we go to look at it, we start to experience fear. You know, usually we tend to you are at a point where you recognize that fear is not something to be avoided, but rather it's an opportunity. It's telling you that there's something there to look at. And that's what I'm hearing from you, which is great. You know, that's because you've got the tools when you can turn around and face it, and that's the only way out of it is to go through it. You can't run away from it. It's like your shadow. No matter how fast you run, it'll always be there. So yeah.
You know, the time that I seem to feel it is like right as I'm waking up, or yeah, like super early morning. I'm not really awake, and it's almost like it starts as like sensation. And I don't know if it's my mind going, oh, that fear, there's fear here. Like I try and not do that, but it's like, and I try and go, what exactly is it that I'm trying to feel? And I don't know if I'm a good girl, and I try really hard to do everything right, so if I feel anything, it's like, oh, what's that?
Mm.
Like, and I want to just say that it's not to fix myself, because I'm realizing I'm still in some ways trying to fix myself, right?
Yeah,
Like to
yeah,
be
yeah.
better. So it's weird. I do keep finding beliefs like you're talking about, I think, where you go, oh, I kind of think that. Oh, that's interesting.
Yes,
It
good. Yeah.
takes the tension out of it. I go, oh, there's that part of me that's, you know, wanting to be a good girl, or
Yep, yep.
so weird. They're more subtle though, right? They
Yeah,
get more
yeah,
subtle.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Yeah, that's an interesting one too. Of course, when you're waking up or when you're going to sleep, they both they're different, but they're both kind of you're in a less defended place. And so that's how they can kind of show themselves at that moment. Yeah, and that can be a really useful place to be as well. Um, yeah, another story. I have developed this story that when Buddha was talking about reincarnation, he wasn't talking about between lifetimes at all. What he was talking about is something that happens every single morning when you wake up. And when you wake up, it's like you put back on the Debra coat, right? And the stories about Debra get get activated. Uh, and so that's the identification thing again. Yeah. So it's a good question. Can we ever be without identification? Not, I don't think so. Not in my experience. That we always, even if we identify as somebody who's awake, we're still identifying. You know, we've still got this idea that we are a somebody, right? Yet our experience through the day is that, wow, I'm not separate. I'm not an individual. The world is me and I am the world at the same time, kind of thing. Yeah. Um, and I suspect
There's
that yeah, go on. Yeah.
I think like you're talking about people who don't understand, or they have beliefs about how this is supposed to look. I was doing a inquiry thing yesterday on who am I? And, people say once you realize there's no you there, you know it forever. And I'm like, I did not have some mind-blowing thing. I mean,
Mm,
although I did have some mind-blowing things, but what didn't pop up was, oh, there's no me there. There was no thought. There
mm.
was just like, so I think I'm like still thinking there's some aspect of me that I'm identifying with. But you're saying that's just part of the journey then. It just gets less and less
Yep.
called on somehow.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
It's really what you're saying is really it's it's what I've been needing to hear, I think, right now. So I'm really happy.
You're definitely on the right path, so to speak. Yeah,
Because in POK, if you listen to some of the things they talk about, like Jeffrey went up to location 4 or 5. They're like saying there's location 20. That like there's places non-existence. They have all these words, which I haven't bothered to kind of learn because it's me trying too hard to intellectualize, right?
absolutely. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
But yeah, it makes it seem like at the same time, I'm content with where I am, and I feel like I'm on this journey. And
Right. Yeah, yeah. Yeah, that's if we could choose an attitude, that's the right attitude. We're on it. We're now at a point where we're no longer seeking, which is actively looking for something in the future to bring back into the present and own or wear or whatever. But we're now on a journey of discovery where we're simply curious and open to what might pop up.
Mhm.
And you definitely are in that state, yeah. From it seems to me anyway, yeah.
I do, I totally feel that way. I do. I feel grateful and peaceful. Yeah, it's good.
Mm. So another story that comes to mind here that I've developed, and when I say I've developed, that's turned up here, is that we've got this what I call the unreal world, which is the so-called normal world, the world of society, which is absolutely locked into language. Right? Language demands there be a subject and an object, and all of the ways that we talk and the way that we use words determine the way that we think, and more, they determine the way that we feel often as well. Um, and so, no, if you say, as an example, let's say you scan the body and look for a feeling, the first thing that's going to happen is you're going to come to something that will involve a label, right? So it'll be a socially acceptable, understandable way of describing what you've got. Let's say I've got a feeling of contraction, right? So feeling is a label, contraction is a label. Right? So what we can do is we can dismiss the label as just a direction to look in, right? Let's say we've got this feeling in the chest. There's another label in the chest, right? So there's this. So we get run out of words straight away. There's something here in the chest, right? Something. And if we dismiss the label as superficial and go beneath the label, then there are details about that feeling that can't be put into words accurately. We can start at a word level, at a label level. We can say, oh, it feels a bit heavy, and it's moving or it's changing shape. That we can apply a color to it or a heat, a temperature, all those kind of things. But when we get down to the details of it, no words can describe it accurately. It's be like you trying to explain to somebody what an orange tastes like that they've never had an orange. It's an impossibility. Right? You know it. but you can't, there are no words that can convey it accurately. You know, you can just go, oh, well, it's a little bit, it's a little bit sharp or it's a little bit tangy or whatever, but that doesn't tell them much at all, you know. So these feelings, when you get down to it, this is just an example, can't be encapsulated by language, by description, right? But you can experience. You can get closer and closer to that feeling, and you just go, oh, and I get goosebumps when I'm doing that. But there's that, and so what I say is that just as a description is that there's almost two parallel worlds going on. There's the world where language works, and when you communicate with other people normally, like when we met and we said, "How are you?" "I'm fine, thank you, I'm fine." Right? That's that language. It's a superficial social uh, level, if you like. There's another world where words can't do justice to anything. We don't even try to use words. That's that level when you're in nature and you're blown away. Oh, I feel like I want to cry. You're blown away by what you're experiencing. Yeah, there's no words to even begin to convey that. It's just there's a whole world at that level. Yeah.
Tree, already it's demeaning the experience, right? And yet there's the most just
Yes.
wrenching, right? Just like, ah, yeah. I know. Oh my God. Oh,
And it's weird because we don't have to think about it and we're there, and yet and it appears like there's a choice, but there isn't. Right? So it's only mind that says there's a choice. I didn't plan to say those things to you and as a result have the experience that happened here. It was conditions that produced that. It was the fact that you're there, the fact that you're in the place that I believe you're in. It's my projection, and all of this kind of stuff is what was involved. There was an inf. How about this one? For if I just do this, for that to happen, everything that's ever happened since the beginning of existence, if that's a place, had to happen exactly the way it did for that to happen. If 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 the butterfly in the Amazon didn't do what he did, that would be different. You know, it's like there's no choice involved. It's an infinite involvement of everything that brings that about. Right? And then the mind comes in afterwards and says, "Oh, I did that," but that's just mind. It's irrelevant. It doesn't. It also is one of the conditions, or an expression of the conditions that the mind turns up and says, I claim ownership of that particular thing, I chose to do it, but it didn't. And so there's also that wonderful realization that it's that, that realization of that everything had to be the way it was for anything to happen took me into the inseparability of everything, that oneness, which is almost a cliche when you talk about it. But there's that how can anything be separate from anything? Because everything is involved. And it gets kind of really weird and really woo-woo-ish if we go, there's no beginning and there's no end to that, you know? It's almost like, this is a weird one, it's almost like we can have memories of the future.
mm.
Yeah.
Oh my God. I totally hear what you're saying. I can totally feel that. And then I don't know. Yeah, it's just that.
Yeah,
So what were you saying about sensations? Because that was super helpful. So they come up, you don't need to label them. Just, you said just experience them. So just with no thought, just let, because it's something is there as I'm waking up, and I'm like,
absolutely. Yes, yes. So when you say with no thought, you can say another thought pops up that says don't have a thought, or thoughts are irrelevant, or whatever. But they're actually not, um, in a sense that they're part of the happening. And so we can have thoughts that we're not even aware of. Right? And it kind of gets a little bit tricky to say that we're not only are they experiences in our head, if you want to say a thought like that, but it's like when we're the kid having all of those experiences, and we evolve to avoid them because of their unpleasantness. A lot of those thoughts become, I don't know how to put it, they become something in the body. The body remembers even though the head doesn't remember. So there's no memory that we can think of, but there is a memory that we can experience.
that's
So
perfect.
yeah.
Mm.
So in a way, what we don't have to, in order to dissolve those, let's label them undesirables that turn up, we don't have to remember the stories that they originated from. We just have to recognize that they're there. So if we recognize that there was something that happened back then that that gives us the opportunity to be open to the fact of the existence of it without even seeing it, without it becoming clear, and the consequence of that can be enough to let it go, depending on how deep it is, of course, how how deep the hooks are, if you like, or how strong the Velcro is, or whatever that is there. So it's simply when you're waking up and you're experiencing that, and that tinge of fear that you recognise, um, is a doorway in to something there. So the technique that I'm going to offer you is it really it comes out of the feta stuff, but it's brilliant, and that is that as you focus on the sensations that have turned up, right? So you're recognizing that thoughts are going to do what thoughts do, and they're going to try and explain and describe what's going on. Well, you kind of want another thought to turn up which dismisses them, right? Now, whether it's successful at dismissing them or not doesn't matter, but the essence is that I'm going to try and get closer to the sensation, and my experience of the sensation at the moment is fear, just slight fear. So as I aim to experience it beneath the level of labels, get down to that detail where you can't find the right words to communicate it, and you're not trying to communicate it, you're just trying to get closer and closer to it. You want to find what the feta people call the gap. You're in between the sensation and the stories that are attached to it. Right? And part of what you're going to do is get close enough to the sensation to recognize that the sensation is just a sensation. It contains no information and no instructions. All of that, all of the information and instructions are in the stories that are attached to that. But as you get into the gap in between the two, you'll see the stories and you'll start to recognize how they um, give the sensation meaning, because simply, all right. But this brings me to another one, another story I've got that is useful. Imagine that. Right, so for a start, I guess you realise that you don't know where thoughts come from. They turn up, they're there for such a quick time that you can't even measure the time, and then they're gone again. And sometimes they'll seem to repeat, and so those thoughts that we say hang around are in fact repetitions. The thought is like a hormone. It's there for a very finite period of time. In case of a hormone, it's going to be about 90 seconds, but in the case of a thought, it's going to be about, I don't know, zero point 0.1 of a millisecond, and then it's gone. So maybe it repeats itself in order to seem like it's hanging around, but that's the way it goes. Anyway, imagine thoughts are like flying books. I imagine big, thick, hard-covered books, and as they're flying, I'm seeing the spine of the book, and I'm seeing the front cover of the book as it flies past me, and I can see the label. I can see the title of the book. And it's really weird, but I know when I see the title of the book, for some of those, I know exactly what's in the book, right? And there's 2.5 hours of reading, or 12 hours of reading if I wanted to get into all the detail. But I don't need to open the book. I simply recognize the title of it as it goes past. Right? And if you get into the gap and you can see thoughts like that, they're the stories that used to be solidly attached, seem to be solidly attached to the sensation, but in fact they're not. They just come together, those things. And so by noticing those thoughts, those stories, as you see them, you'll get glimpses of and ideas, and maybe even memories will come back to you about what's going on with that kind of thing. So once they slow down, there's less stories going on with that sensation. Then you can move even closer to the sensation, and when you get really close to it, it'll dissolve. It'll change and disappear. It'll simply dissolve. It will reveal something underneath it, and it'll be another sensation with a whole lot of stories attached to it. And so if you follow this process, get in the gap, watch the stories that come off that. And by this stage, you'll be having memories of childhood, all sorts of little things will pop up, or not. Um, and then you'll get closer and closer to what that toxic starting point was that went on. Right? You'll start to see. And ideally, this is a bit of a trick. I've made a meditation which I put on. Uh, it's one on YouTube, and I've got just an audio version of that meditation. But what essentially that is that you, as an adult, go back and visit your child with that limited perspective on what they were experiencing, and you bring back your adult perspective, and you you connect with your inner child, and I'll run out of words here. You're going to communicate to that child your adult perspective, and have the child recognize that it had a very limited perspective, and that any guilt or shame that it experienced was not something inherent in it. It was something that evolved from the conditions that it was swimming in at the time. Right? And the consequence of that is that you can um, upgrade your inner child with a much wider, wiser perspective. And by doing so, what in my meditation, at that point where you feel the child is getting it, they're grokking what you're trying to communicate. You're not communicating with the words alone, but the tone of the voice, the feelings that you've imbue in those words are what does the communication. And when that child's getting it, it'll merge with you. You'll feel a kind of a merging, and you can pick it up and bring it back into the present. And so what happens is that you collapse time. You no longer got that inner child back there, desperate to try and avoid the pain of what it was experiencing. And you bring it back into the present, and it's in you, and it integrates, and you then have a different relationship with that inner child, and that stuff that it was running away from, which you experience as fear in the present, uh, is just no longer needs to be avoided.
I can feel that. Yeah, that's really good. I think I must be doing that all the time, even unconsciously. Like yesterday, I just felt like crying. I didn't know why. And I just cried.
Yeah, great.
Just, yeah, so weird.
Yeah, and it can be many things, eh? Yeah, that crying.
So
Mm.
helpful what you're telling me. I'm so grateful to have this conversation with you.
Yeah, I feel privileged too. Thank you. Mm. How are you, Paul?
Good, Vince. I was wondering whether this was a private session or whether it was open to
No,
the public.
it's
No?
open. Anybody can be
Uh,
here. Yeah,
that's good. I'm good. How are you? Haven't seen you for a while.
yeah, I'm good.
That's good.
And Debra's great. Yeah,
That's great. Excellent.
yeah. Just like I imagine that there is an infinite number of paths to this waking up stuff, and yeah, it's just beautiful to see a different path and that it happens there for you as well. Yeah,
It's funny because I kind of relate it to the Finder's Course, the meditation, but I can think back over the last maybe 15 years when not on a spiritual path at all. I mean, I've been a meditator, TM, my whole life, not for spiritual reasons, but because I used to get migraine headaches. And when I meditated, I did not get them. So I've been meditating for years, kind of on and off. But I had some weird things happen and I go, what was that all about? Even I would try and talk to someone about it and they just looked at me like, mm.
yeah, yeah,
So
yeah,
I know stuff's been happening, just like
yeah,
weird things. I go, I don't know what that was.
yeah,
And then you just carry on, right? Until
yeah,
the,
yeah,
I don't
yeah.
know if the knocking gets louder at your door or something. I don't know.
Absolutely. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah, I often
Just,
start by saying to people, how old were you when you first thought that you were different to all the other kids at school?
yeah, young.
That'd go down like a lead balloon. How do you get that reaction? How do they react when you ask that? Like, is it just
Oh,
all sorts of different
well,
reactions?
everybody comes up with an answer. Yeah, it's like, I
Yeah.
mean, it's a trick question in a way because I think probably everybody experiences that. But I've got this kind of very light-hearted story that says, well, what some of us have got this gene that makes us a bit different, and it's called a weird gene. We're weird, and the consequence of that is that we don't we rebel from a really early age. We go, no, that's wrong. That's not the way the world is supposed to be. I've got an idea that the world is supposed to be full of love and joy and happiness and all I can experience from others is all this pain. Yeah. So,
Yeah.
yeah. So we're really lucky if we've got the weird gene, even though it was really painful in the early days. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, now I
But when
cherish.
you, so go ahead. I was
Where
just going to
does
say, Vince, that when I first came on, you were talking about the universe and how everything had to happen for this actual
Mm.
existence to even occur. That is in itself probably was one of my openings, like opportunities for opening. I got the conceptually part of it, like it was just a massive concept about how, okay, whether it was the Big Bang or whatever else it was. And I'd sit there and just at night and just look out at the stars and look out into the universe and just try to sort of like comprehend what it was all. How could something be so expansive, so
Yeah,
magnificent,
yeah, yeah,
so,
yeah, yeah.
and yet I couldn't feel it.
Right. Okay.
This
Yeah,
is how could I not understand this? How could I not? I mean, from an intellectual point of view, it was so, yeah, that's the way it is. But it wasn't until after, everything shifted, then you just go, yeah, look at that.
yeah, yeah, yeah. It's
That's
crazy.
just different. That's just everything
Yeah.
just changes. Everything just, even
Yeah.
like a piece of paper on your desk, like it's just ridiculous.
Yeah, yeah. You triggered a memory in me then that I don't know how old I was. I could have been 10 years old. I don't remember, but I remember I, I, I was in the kitchen and I remember having this. I think I must have just learned about an atom and the shape of an atom and the proton and the neurons revolving around it, and that was kind of like uh, a a template for the way the universe is, that we have the Earth and we have it going around the sun in the same way that neutrons go around the atom. And I was looking at the leg of the kitchen table. I can't actually remember what it looked like now, but I was blown away by the fact that I could go down infinitely into that, and there was these atoms in that, or I could go out upwards infinitely, and it was always a reflection of this nature of the formation of an atom. And I thought, what if our whole world is one atom in the leg of a table in a giant's house kind of thing? It was like and I just had this mind boggle of I could go infinitely outwards or infinitely inwards, and there would just be reflection, reflection, reflection.
It's
And
crazy.
I couldn't tell that to anybody at the time. That was just too weird. Yeah. It's funny, isn't
Yeah.
it? How I haven't thought of that for I don't know how many years, 50 years. I've never thought of that one, and then you just triggered it for me when you were saying that. Yeah,
It's interesting what you mentioned earlier about the your memory projects your future, like, or I can't remember exact words, but yeah, how your memory creates
yeah,
your future. Yeah. And then your memory is just thought. And so you sort of like, wow, how can this be so predictable?
yeah,
Everything that exists and it's just predictable. How the mind will just keep rolling the same stories, the same projections, the same. Yeah.
I've been
It's
thinking
actually,
about, oh, sorry, I'm sorry.
I was just going to say, it's actually quite boring when you actually do see that thought structure and the continual stories, and they're just variations on the same story, the same patterns, and same everything else. It actually becomes it's quite boring. And you just like, so much better to do other, like to be out here and
yeah, yeah, yeah.
yeah, yeah. Anyway, sorry, what were you going to say?
I've been thinking about, how people have like the bucket list of things they want to do or places they want to go, and I'm kind of like, I I've never been to Egypt, but maybe I have. Maybe
Yeah.
I have. Right? I can whatever I think. I mean, I've seen pictures of the pyramids and I think about experiences I've had where I've gone somewhere. They're in the same place. They're in the same place in my mind. I mean, maybe I won't have that sensation, but I just don't have to go to Egypt anymore.
Mm.
I can go there in my mind enough to it's going to be a memory anyway when I go and come back. Do you know what I mean? I don't know. It's like,
Well, it's more than a memory. I think everything we experience changes us
yeah, I
at
think you're right.
at some level. And you know what? The brain doesn't know the difference between something you fantasize about and something that is actual, because the same processes happen. And so when you have a memory, you don't pull up a finished product. Like if you have a memory of anything, it's constructed when you memorize, when you experience the memory of it. It's constructed from, it comes from different parts of your brain because it's all about sense input. And the sixth sense, of course, is thoughts, which is also an input that we respond to. So, in a sense, every memory is a construction. And so, if you imagine the future, that's exactly the same as a memory from the past. And it's a construction that happens, and we have an experience as a result of that. We respond to it with an experience, and that experience changes us. So in a weird way, we can pull in ideas from the future to affect us in the present. But it's, yeah, when I said that one, it was like I can't go any further than that because it's beyond words again, that's, yeah. So I had an experience. I took my grandson to a virtual reality uh, shop, whatever, for his birthday 2 years ago or so. And we put on these virtual reality goggles and we experienced these worlds of different things. And one of them was you're in an elevator and you go up really high up into this building in the elevator, and then a door opens and there's a plank just going out, and you walk out on this plank and you look down and you're like 50 stories up in the air and you're on this plank, and there's a cake sitting on a plate at the end of the plank, and you're meant to go and pick up a piece of cake. Well, I tell you what, this body reacted like I was really 54 stories up. I was scared shitless to walk out on that plank. Even though I knew it was virtual reality and there was a solid floor underneath me, my body still reacted like it was real. That was a great experience, I tell you. The mind fools us in such a huge way. Yeah,
Trying to keep you alive.
absolutely. Yeah, survival. Wow. Yeah, yeah, it's crazy, isn't it? So even though we can have these contradictions, that experience still happens as it's going to happen. Yeah.
There's something about just being somewhere and just sitting and feeling the fullness of that. Like just like just staring at a wall almost and feeling content and feeling the richness of that experience, where there'd be, other times where or tell that to somebody else and they go, what are you doing? There's, nothing's happening
Yeah,
here, right?
yeah,
I'm like, oh wow, but there's so much more happening.
yeah, yeah. And if you try to explain what's happening to them, it just becomes crazy. It can't happen. Yeah. They'll not. It's so much of this stuff can only be experienced. It can't be, you can't communicate it. So it
I
comes
can
back, go on.
no, I was just gonna say it's why there's so many poems written.
Yes,
Try and describe it because you can feel it in the poems when
yes,
people are really
yeah,
that.
yeah. Poetry's great like that. Yeah, yeah. So what came to mind was then you can't transmit any of this to somebody unless they're a seeker, unless they're already on the path, so to speak. You know, otherwise it never ends well. Trying to, you'll be faced with people on a daily basis who are suffering, and you can see clearly that their suffering is self-induced, right, by the way that their mind works and so on, and they go round and round in circles with their suffering, and you can probably ache to help them, but you can't. You can't. What it is an opportunity for you to see that what got triggered in you to fix them is your issue. It's really not got anything to do with them. They just were a convenient trigger. That for a couple of years after waking up, there was this intense desire to help people, to take their suffering away, you know. But then Camilla says something really great. She says, "Who are you to take away somebody's suffering? You might deprive them of the opportunity to wake up," which I kind of like, you know.
It's a powerful statement that, yeah, don't meddle, right? I don't know. Yeah, it's interesting because I'm totally a caretaker, people pleaser, and that thought is what's helped me just step back.
Yep, yep. So it's like a mirror. You turn it inward. You go, yeah, this is me. Yeah.
Mhm. Paul, are you in POK?
No, this is actually my first experience with POK.
Did you
I was
just
only
sign
just sorry,
did you just sign up for it
this
recently?
meeting. No, I just saw this on on Facebook. I was just looking through some things on Facebook, and I just thought, oh, it's a bit quiet at work, so I'll just jump on and see what's going on.
Yeah. Paul,
Haven't seen or spoken to Vince for a while, so
yeah. Paul's a guide at Liberation Unleashed,
Oh, I see. Okay.
and I put on a couple of Liberation Unleashed Facebook groups about this meeting. So Paul saw one of those, I guess.
yeah.
What's your how do I find you on Facebook, Vince?
Um, I'll put in the chat a link, so because otherwise it's impossible to find people. So do friend request me. Yeah, that'd be great. Um,
And is this the kind of conversation that you have usually on your Facebook meetups?
yeah, pretty much. Um, so if you give me your email address, I can put you I've got a notification list going.
That would be perfect. Here, I'll type it in for you.
Excellent. All right. So I generally have, apart from the POK thing, I generally have 3 meetings every week at different times, trying to facilitate everybody's time zone.
How did you find POK?
Well, Paddy has been involved in a few groups, and one of the other guides at Liberation Unleashed, Elad, is fairly active in POK, and so he
Okay.
keeps inviting people to come. Yeah, I'm actually blown away by how many meetings POK have. 90 meetings a week. Wow, that's amazing, isn't it? And the number of people, like thousands of people. I mean, I've been involved in Liberation Unleashed now for about 14 years, and um, I've I've guided, I don't know, hundreds of people through the gate there. But it's a drop in the ocean compared to POK. I'm just blown away by how many people have got into that one. Yeah. So there is a huge community of people in the world who are, I imagine, driving some kind of change, excuse the words, but you know what I mean, in the world, where I mean, and yet here we see what happened in the States with Trump as almost going back to the dark ages, for a lot of people, so there's both extremities exist at the same time, it's and I my initial reaction with that in is a bit like, why are all the wars in the world? Why all the suffering? Why all the poverty? Why all of that stuff in the world, And and a story evolved here. Um, every time I say a word, it opens up so many things. Um, I had a period in my life where I was a naturopath, and so what I recognize is that we have this thing called a healing crisis, right? So let's say you ingest something that gives you food poisoning. Your bodily reaction is going to be vomiting and diarrhea as an attempt to expel the toxins from the body. And I see that all of this shit in the world, all the wars and suffering and what's happened in America are all part of a healing crisis for the world. But it happens on a different time scale. I mean, I just turned 77, so I may never live long enough to see this body, the world, heal properly. And maybe it never will. Maybe it will constantly go through healing crises. I don't know. But my story that it is a healing crisis that we're seeing makes it much more tolerable, much more easy to live with than it used to be, where it was just wrong. You know, yeah,
Yeah, I'm heartened to see so many people finding an ease in their suffering so that they can go out and be that for other people. Like my nephew, I'm he's turned 19, and I haven't really had that much. It's my husband's sister's child, and he's kind of come into our lives just for visits. And I spoke to him the other day, and he just has gone through all this nonviolent communication studies, which I don't know that much about, but I was blown away with what he was saying to me about wanting to be loving kindness. And I was just like, who are you? How did you learn this? Like, he's finding his way, and why he's choosing that, and he lives in a place where it's not manly. He
mm,
like talks
mm,
sensitive, and he cries a lot, and he's sort of embracing that. It's like, I mean, it's like, oh, there are people who are coming to this, right? How can you even be
yes,
a seeker at 19? I guess you can, but yeah, he's finding it so early.
yes, yeah.
I'm just hoping there are more people who have that.
Oh, they're everywhere. They're everywhere. And we don't know about them a lot of the time because, as you say, it's not manly, so we don't show it, or whatever. Yeah, yeah. Yeah, it is heartening to see that recognition, and it's so sad it's it's sad in a beautiful way. I mean, I I can imagine that a whole lot of Trump voters will be they'll see a reality rather than the lines they were fed. That see that he didn't do it consciously. I don't imagine. I have no idea really, but I am but he accidentally tapped into all those people's fear, um, and the consequence of that was he got voted in, and so what? But they'll start to recognise that their fear is some of them, a lot of them will start to recognise that that fear is uh, not a healthy place to be, or something about it. So a lot of people may well um, get turned around as a result of the experience that they couldn't before the experience actually existed. Yeah.
Vince, it's funny that this is a topic or a discussion about, but and it was very interesting that you say like, the body wants to eject, poison, or, the body will go into breaking down high temperature, or turning into a high temperature, or turning up the temperature in itself to get rid of infection,
Yep.
to create an environment where, the infection can't leave, or the bacteria. And yeah, it's so true. I mean, see, but I don't see it the way you're seeing it. I see Trump as that, as the body ejecting out the the infection, because the other side of that is what created all the wars. It's what created the neocons and
Mhm.
the industrial complex. You know what I mean? These are the ones that created all the imbalances,
Yeah.
and Trump's uh, mandate from the people is to get rid of that. Well, that's the way I see it. So, it's funny how these conceptually we can put these things in place, but we can build these different types of, I guess they're all just, thoughts and opinions and beliefs.
Yeah, yeah. No, I get what you're saying. I mean,
Yeah.
as a kid, I saw that there was so much suffering that was needless. Seemed to me to be needless, but maybe it wasn't needless. Maybe we didn't need to experience it in order to move beyond it. I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, and so, yes, I mean, so the other side of it is the people that put him in expressed something I've been expressing for years, and that is that the system hasn't been working for us. It's been broken. Right? So
Absolutely.
yes, maybe good things will come out of this idiot's attitude, even if by accident. I can't. So it's like, yeah, it's crazy stuff. The same thing can happen, but for a different reason. So he's not trying to wake the world up. He just wants great power, but he inadvertently may well wake up a whole lot of people. Yeah.
The
Oh,
Democratic Party in this country, to me, it failed me, and I'm not a Trump lover by any means, and I did not vote for him. But this whole political correctness and this elite attitude, they're stupid because they vote for Trump. I mean, who wants to be called that? And
Mm.
I've said that over the last 4 years. God, these fucking idiots, what are they doing? You can't talk to people like that. They're unhappy. And the Democratic Party was offering these people without even saying, do you want to vote for him? I mean, we're just told, here's your candidate, right? Biden. It's like, that's it. I
Mm.
mean, and then we're supposed to sign up. Same with Hillary Clinton. Here's your candidate. It's like, wait, we're not getting to pick though. Do you know? So
Yeah, yeah,
I can see the things have to crash and we're all gonna like have food poisoning for a few years until we maybe all work together
yeah,
to
yeah,
to
yeah.
make
And
it,
it's not that different here. It's maybe not as extreme in Australia, but it's the same thing. We've got a two-party system, and it's not working for people. You know, it's working for some richies, but it's not working for the average person, you know? Yeah.
Yeah, so interesting. But Trump, though, Trump, that's the best they could do. It's like, oh my God. Hmm.
You know, it's a funny thing because I wasn't a big, actually, I was quite detested by the guy in the first, his first run as a president. But then his second time round, you see the actual character itself. And if you take all the labeling away from what he is and what he's doing, and you start to then truly see the nature of him or that being, uh, it's quite interesting to see how, personally, how, I've gone 180 on this guy. I actually think he's a very compassionate person to actually offer himself to his country for the betterment of his country. I mean, he's a billionaire a few times over, so he's not about the money and the power. He has that already. And in fact, when you have a look at it, when you really, really have a look at it, he's the only president that lost zeros off his account. You know what I mean? Like he's actually lost his own money. And it's interesting when you have a look at the other presidents that everyone idolized, the Obamas, the Clintons. I mean, and when you really start to dig and have a look at the true nature of these people, it's quite. I have a friend who's a conspiracy theorist, and he calls Obama the devil. And when I first heard that, I'm going, oh, all right, that's a bit much. But then he started showing me some of the real things that go on, and Bill Clinton's sexual appetite for women and his predator nature and things like that. You were never fed any of this in the mainstream media. And it's quite interesting to see how the mainstream media created opinions and formed the little boxes to place everybody in as a directive from the the Democratic Party, the neocons, the industrial complex, right? And so now when I look at Trump, I don't see him as a egomaniac or quite overbearing and quite, I don't know, there's many words to describe something like that, but more so a person that, okay, he's got his things, but truly, I think there's a sense of compassion there for his country, for his people, and for doing his part in trying to rebuild a system that works for the people. And that in itself has to be, you can only do that with true compassion. You can't do that for, as a play of power for the self or for the ego, because that goes deeper than just thought. It goes deeper than just, oh, I got a plan to be powerful. That's cellular. That's internal. Like that. It's something beyond thought. So I might be just talking total nonsense, but
No, it's a good. It's interesting. I found myself resisting what you're saying. You know, I think
yeah.
he is an egomaniac. He's a total narcissist, and he is there to get richer, and he is there to exercise power. But what you're saying will happen accidentally as a result of him being there. That's so. I think you're being way too forgiving of him, if you like to describe him like that. I don't think he's got an ounce of compassion in him. I think he's a total narcissist. But I could be wrong. I mean, that's just my thoughts, and I recognise that too. It's just a story that I've got. Um, and the same with Obama. I saw Obama as a good guy, but if what I say with Obama, we won't talk about Clinton, but Obama, he was constrained by the system. You know? So, and although I imagine, and it's purely my imagination, that he wanted to do really good things, he belonged to a party and he had to toe the party line, just like here in Australia, you know. Um, and so consequently, he was fairly ineffectual in bringing about. But then again, I hear from my friend who's a conspiracy theorist that there were more bombs dropped under Obama than what there's been by a lot of other people. So I don't know. Who knows? Maybe the CIA runs the whole show, not the government. What it's nothing can be separated out. I think these people are not individuals in the sense that they're not separate from the environment that they've grown up in and that they're expressing now. That the whole thing is just one big totality. That's well, and not even that kind of makes it seem separate. But it's we say the system, which of course is purely a concept. But what it does is it encompasses an infinite range of things, from the individual personalities in it to the history of it to everything that's there. So who knows what the actuality is. I don't. I'm a microcosm in that thing.
All I can say is it's been 10,000 of these systems before this system, so or
Yeah.
10 million, maybe even more. Who knows?
Yeah.
And
So
they've all come to pass. There's no permanent situation. There's no permanent.
that's right. Yeah. I mean, years ago, I would say to my wife, democracy doesn't work very well. And she'll say, well, what's better? And of course, that shut me up because I couldn't, what I want to come up with looks much more like socialism, but it's still just a system. And of course,
It's
every
a system.
system is going to get corrupted, isn't it? Simply by the longer it's in place, the more corrupt it's going to be. Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's all
Yeah.
human
So
nature,
much
right?
like
It's all
Yes.
who
so
we
much.
are. It's like, look at the kids on the playground. They're already starting it. You stink, right? Everyone throws stuff at them. That's stinky. I mean, we already get aggressive and um bad behavior, or it's not bad behavior, it's human behavior, and we have to learn how to manage all those
With it.
things.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
weird.
All I can say is we live in interesting times,
That's for sure.
and it's kind of always been that way, hasn't it? Yeah. Look, you guys just talk for a moment. Well, I've had somebody trying to phone me, and they're really insistent. I've hung up on them 5 times now, and they still. So I'll just see if it's really is urgent. So just you talk without me for a moment.
Sure.
I don't think I can't listen to conspiracy theory stuff. It makes me scared. Makes me feel like I don't know anything.
So, but like, yeah, I can see that. Like it's. There's the
And what,
absurd, I
yes,
suppose.
sorry,
I
there's a
was going to say
lag.
that there's the absurd for, what they have to say sometimes. It's just absurd. But it's no different to the absurdities that we get fed from the mainstream, does it? I mean, it's just because it's said to the masses. It's portrayed on a TV medium or something. We tend to believe it
It's weird too that news,
rather than
yeah,
not.
news anymore is if I see something happen with my own eyes, and then I see how it's spoken about in a news article and they don't match, they're so far off. It's like, well, what the hell? That's not even how it happened. And it seems like every article I read, I have to look at it like that, like maybe, if I want to go do some research. And how many times you see a news headline and then 2 days later you realize they weren't right, they overguessed, or they didn't guess right about what actually happened. It's like, oh my God, what is news anyway? Is it sharing facts? Maybe.
It's what I found personally is that when I watch any mainstream media news now, is that there's always an agenda being driven by the news itself. there's always okay, there might be a factual action of something, someone dies in a flood or, something like that, or a train falls off it. I don't know, something tragic, right? Usually something ever tragic, the factual stuff. But mostly everything else that's not like tragic is just an agenda being pushed.
We're hooked on
And
drama, I think.
yeah.
I read an article. We have this newspaper here. Well, it's not a newspaper. I get an email called The Conversation, and it's like a newspaper online that articles are written usually by university people. So it's less opinion and more actual is the story. Anyway, I read this article that came out of that was really interesting, and what it talked about was an intellectual obesity crisis. Right? And some research has been done that recognised that information in the brain has a similar response to the dopamine part of the body as food and sex does. That essentially it makes us feel good. So we consume information for the dopamine hit. And when that information is dramatic, we get a bigger hit. Right? And whether they realise it or not, a lot of these news outlets are basically, and it's the way Facebook has become so addictive. It promotes that dopamine hit from information. And it doesn't matter what the information is. If it seems like it might be useful, you get a bigger hit from it. And that made a lot of sense to me. Yeah. So you can see why Fox News is popular with people who, let's say, are less critical of the way of their consumption. They like McDonald's or something. Um, so they get high on what they're hearing without even realizing it. It
It's funny
makes Yeah, go on.
for me, I can like my husband, we have some friends who are pretty Republican and we don't talk about politics, but when they start talking, my husband and I look at each other and go, I have no idea what they're talking about. Where do you guys, they listen to Fox News. Their stream of conversation is like speaking another language to both of us. We're like, what are you talking about? Where'd you hear that? Because we don't watch TV news at all and really try very carefully to read news, but you can hear the commonality of their conversation and go, oh, check that out. Wow, okay. It's they're fed this and that's their world. And it's
Yep,
really strange to feel that.
yep. And if you watch them in the right way, you can see how they're getting good feelings from it.
Mhm, mhm, mhm,
It's a version of masturbation, probably.
mhm.
Yeah, I have where when we live in a little village here, and when we first turned up, a neighbour invited us, my wife and I, to go out with a group of people who get together and go out every Friday night to uh, give business to various local businesses and so on, and get together and talk. And they're all, I would say, Republican minded, people. Where my wife and I are the only, we're left wing socialists to them, but nevertheless, you know what?
Lefties, eh?
Yeah, they're all actually nice people, even though they've got really weird views of the world. Yeah. And same, we just, if we don't talk about politics normally, but yeah, if we want a bit of excitement, we just have to throw a political view in, and all of a sudden the emotions fly. Yeah. And I'm a bit mischievous because I tend to do that a little bit. Yeah. We joke about it though. It's kept lighthearted. Yeah.
So much fear. There's so much fear in the news, and that's what we really hear from our friends. You
Yeah.
know,
Yeah.
they're suffering from what they hear. It's like, oh my God.
Yep. Yeah. I get it. I've got a couple of newsletters that turn up for me, and one of them is called "Fix the News," and essentially that it just gives you a list of all the good things that's happened in the world and in the last week. And it's amazing how much good stuff happens that you never hear on the news. They'll try and end the news item on the channel that we watch, which is a local channel, um, with a good news story often, but it's usually very petty. You know, it's a kitten, a cat meme or something like that that they end up with just to make you feel good at the end of it, kind of thing. But essentially, they do the same thing. They're drama queens all the time. Um,
I'm gonna
but
have to leave the conversation now, guys. So thanks very much, Vince. Good to see you
no,
again,
no worries,
Deborah.
Paul. Yeah, good on
We'll
you.
talk soon.
Yeah, yeah.
Thanks, mate. Bye bye.
This newsletter will tells us that, you know what, at the moment, in spite of Ukraine and Gaza and Lebanon and all of that, there are actually less wars going on at the moment than there's ever been in history.
Wow.
Yeah. But you
That's
don't get
amazing.
that from mainstream media, do you? You know, you just see all of those because they focus on those things. You know, we've we almost eradicated polio from the face of the earth. You know, in spite of what the conspiracy theorists say or the anti-vaxxers say, vaccines have done a bloody good job of fixing up those kind of things. Measles is almost gone. You know, there's
Mhm.
so many good things that have happened that people don't even hear about.
Yeah.
Yeah,
My husband said he read an article that was there was a news organization that said for a week we're only gonna talk about good things, all the good things that are happening, and their viewership dropped by like 80%.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah, they
Right?
go broke.
Right, caveman brain. What is the Rick Hansen says you're hardwired, your brain is Velcro for bad and Teflon for good.
Yeah, yeah.
Because bad is what's kept you safe all these thousands of years. And it's like, yeah,
Absolutely, yeah, yeah,
we don't have tigers stalking us when we go outside. And yet we still have that brain that's looking for danger, right? And
yeah,
so, yeah, it's weird.
yeah. So that's another story that comes up here. There's been quite a few psychological studies done from many years ago, actually, that's shown that people that grow up in an authoritarian atmosphere, let's say you've got a kind of a dictator for a father kind of thing, or whatever, but people who grow up in an authoritarian atmosphere have this primitive brain at the back of their head, that flight, fright, freeze, etc. part of the brain is much more active and actually is bigger than the left wing latte sippers who have the frontal cortex, the prefrontal cortex working a lot more. And so those people who are operating from this brain are actually operating at a survival level all the time. They can't even consider the right or wrongness of it because that requires this part of the brain to work. So it's a physical thing. So people who grow up in authoritarian atmosphere are much more likely to be conservative in their attitude, in their political attitude.
Yeah,
Yeah. And then
that's
you can
interesting.
see, especially in America, just my view of America, I don't know how accurate it is, where you've got a huge, absolutely huge fundamental Christian thing. Of course, the authority figure after dad's gone becomes God or church or Jesus or whatever. And if that doesn't work, we'll use government as the authority figure. So we always have that authority figure going, and it keeps us in that primitive part of the brain. Yeah. So it's in a way, it becomes, I kind of imagine as the story goes on that there's not much hope for the adults in the world to change their views because they're really entrenched. I mean, it can happen, of course, um, but really what we need to do is focus on the next generation coming through. We need to start at kindergarten and teach mindfulness in schools so that they can recognize that their thoughts are just thoughts, and see that what is actual is something different to what they think is actual if they're not critical in their thinking. So that's where we need, but that, although, I had a big part of my life pushing that um, mindfulness in schools concept. I didn't get very far at all, but there is a mob in Australia, and I don't know if they're worldwide. They may be, that do promote that kind of thing in schools, and they're quite active. And so I'd just love to see a lot more of that happen. Yeah, because peer
I
group
don't
pressure is amazing.
I don't see that happening in the environment of our country because I think people will hear it as like those wacky people, they want to try and control my child, right? There's so much weird stuff in our schools
Yeah,
right now,
yeah,
taking books out and it's like it's really crazy, but
yeah, yeah,
you know
yeah.
what
I'm blown away by how they've turned woke into a negative. I mean, to
Mhm.
be more sensitive, how can it be a bad thing? There you go. And I've heard, I don't know how true this is. I was one of the people in my groups it lives in Arizona, I think, somewhere down towards the south, not Texas, but in that direction. And when Trump got voted in, before he even takes office, they're already handing out Trump Bibles to kids in school. Wow. So I think, well, there you go. We're going to have a, what do they call it? Handmaiden's Tale reality turning up.
It's not going to be pretty. I think no, I don't know. I'm not scared. I think it's time to do some shit. Let's mess some stuff up and see what happens. Because the other people, they're not going to get what they think they're going to get.
No,
And I think
no.
once they realize that, we're going to have to join together and go, we're all being played. Let's figure this out. Right. And
Yeah,
yeah, I
yeah.
don't know. Well, we're getting ready for our meal, so I'm going to say goodbye. Thank you so much for the
You're very,
conversation.
you're very welcome. I'll send you an email with those links to those other groups and that as well. Yeah,
Yeah,
you'd be
thank you.
very,
I'll look for you.
yeah.
Yeah. Thank you so
So,
much. You're exactly what I needed today.
good stuff. Thank you.
Thanks, Vince.